Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete, joined as always by Ricardo Martinez Paz. Boy, do we have a treat of an episode today. Crazy. This may be the most, I don't know if highly anticipated, I don't know if excitement level. We've got stuff to talk about today on Speaking Steagles, as free agency has just been crazy for both of these teams. We're going to dive into all of it. But before we do, I ask you, Ricardo, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well, man. We did our fantasy baseball drafts, feeling all right about it. But March Madness too. It's crazy, man, in sports right now. It's like hockey's, really getting down to the end of it. But, ooh, man, it's like peak time, man, like for sports. But
yes,
yeah,
man.
how are you
Everything is
doing?
going on. We're doing fantasy baseball drafts. We're filling out our brackets. We're getting ready for NHL playoffs. And we're monitoring what really is going on all around the NFL and just a crazy free agent year for just the quarterback carousel, running backs going all over the place, defenders getting big money, some big offensive linemen moving around. I mean, it has just been a crazy free agent cycle, as crazy as it feels like every year it just gets more and more crazy, and this year certainly is not disappointed.
Yeah, man. I mean, the cap space being like 30 million more or whatever than last year, something like that. Like that certainly played a role in it. But dude, yeah, this is beyond like the first, not even like the tampering period. Like that day itself was crazy. Like, yeah, it was the wildest day, like I think ever. Like it was just ridiculous, man.
And that's why I don't know if you saw that clip, but Adam Schefter's screen time the one day, or I think it was showing like the day of that first day of tampering period, it was like 15 hours of screen time. It was something crazy.
Unreal, dude. Oh my God, so much news.
It has been crazy, and it's been crazy for both of these teams too. And I think the first place we have to start, man, I mean, the Eagles have made some crazy moves, but the most important position in football is, and really all professional sports, is the quarterback position. And the Steelers really have done kind of the complete opposite of everything that they told us leading up to free agency they were going to do. And they have completely overhauled their quarterback room, signing Russell Wilson to a 1-year, $1.2 million deal to be the starter next year. But not stopping there, also trading for Justin Fields to be his backup, which they have kind of indicated that it's not really going to be a competition. This is going to be Russ's job to start, and Justin Fields is going to be the backup. But Pittsburgh getting rid of Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, the entire quarterback room of last year gone. We'll get into the Kenny Pickett trade a little later, but let's start out with these two new quarterbacks coming into Pittsburgh. And, Pittsburgh, everybody was saying that this was, Mike Tomlin said in his end of season press conference that he believed the starter for next year was on the roster. And well, that's just not the case anymore. So now it's going to be Russell Wilson, and the Steelers get him for pretty much, it's no risk. It's 1 year.
Yeah.
The minimum amount of money that they can pay him. Denver's paying him, an astronomical amount to not play for the Broncos. And the Steelers get to take a chance on him and see if he's got anything left in the tank. And if he can resurrect his career a little bit in Pittsburgh.
Oh my, like this, starting off with Russell Wilson, man, like the rumors were really heating up those first few days, like even before the legal tampering period, like you would see the notifications like, oh, he's traveling to Pittsburgh. We're making a quick pit stop to New York, it really started to heat up and then that was, I'm pretty sure, the first signing that the Steelers made.
It was because that was before the tampering period, because Wilson had been cut.
Yeah, so just that sort of set the tone, and it was like, yeah, Omar Khan's not here to mess around. Like, he's gonna make moves. We were kind of talking about this last episode. Like, we just had the feeling he was gonna be aggressive. Maybe not to this extent. This was only the start of it, really. But focusing more on this, like, this is, like you said, very low risk. I mean, you're getting a guy who's won a Super Bowl, tons of experience. And it's not like he had a bad season last year. It's just, kind of a falling out between him and Sean Payton. He threw 26 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions. So he's still a serviceable, like he's a starter still in the NFL. Sure, you could say what you want about personality and maybe he's too focused on himself, but like you've got him for nothing. Like this, you got him for pennies essentially. This is, I mean, just such a steal. I mean, like I just really, I feel like there's no downside to it.
There is no downside to it. And I'm kind of becoming very optimistic about what the Steelers are building for next year on offense. And with Russell Wilson now going to be, the quarterback under center here, like this is a spot that I think it makes a lot of sense for him and a lot of sense for the Steelers. And I think he can succeed here, man, with the style of offense that Pittsburgh wants to run and the type of system that Arthur Smith is going to put in place. It's going to be very similar to where he had his success in Seattle with a power running attack, Marshawn Lynch, and they weren't asking Russell Wilson to do too much. So I think it's going to be a lot of that same thing kind of here in Pittsburgh. And like you said, he's still capable of being a starter. He's still very serviceable. He's going to hit the throws that you need him to hit. Is he going to go back to being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? No, but is he going to be good enough to win games? And, yes. And I believe that he's also going to be good enough to be better than what the Steelers have had in years past with his skill set combined with the new offensive system. I get excited about it, man. I mean, there definitely are some things I'm a little bit worried about regarding his personality, but from purely a football standpoint, I think that the move makes a ton of sense for both sides and is one that can be really successful.
Yeah, and you just said it. Like he's not gonna be asked to do very much. I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a run first offense, and I mean he's played in that style before, so this isn't gonna be anything totally foreign to him. And also because he's not being, I mean, obviously he's getting paid all that money from Denver, but like to get a fresh start, I just feel like the pressure isn't as intense in Pittsburgh. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that.
He's got nothing to lose, man. I mean, he's just trying to resurrect his career at this point because right now, I mean, from where he was, I mean, he was maybe you could still make the case he's a Hall of Famer. I don't really know at that point how his stats over his career stack up, but he went from being a guy that was 100% on a trajectory to be a Hall of Famer to, all of a sudden now, you're wondering, well, what's even left of his career? He's got nothing to lose, and this just feels like a perfect fit of a team that kind of needs an experienced quarterback that can go out there and win games when you've got these guys, especially on the defense, that are in their prime. I don't want to say Pittsburgh is a ready-to-win now team, kind of the way Denver was when Russell Wilson first went there, but they're a few pieces away. And if they can just get solid quarterback play, there's no reason this team can't compete for a division title with the roster as currently constructed and with Russell Wilson, at the quarterback position.
Yeah, man. Omar Khan, I mean, absolutely nailed it with this. And I mean, again, like I said, this was only the start of it all. But like seriously, like this, I mean, this is the best quarterback you've had since Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, talent-wise, I mean, better than Pickett and then Rudolph and all the other guys you've had since then. So yeah, it's a win, like for the most part, really. Like I know you said you had like some slight concerns, but really,
I mean, and the slight concerns is it's like everything you hear from some of his former teammates is that he's kind of a weird guy in the locker room.
yeah,
As far as like leadership goes, he can kind of come off as self-centered and a little bit too focused on Russell Wilson and not the team. And you hear the stuff when he was in Denver about getting his own kind of area in the locker room and having some of his own training staff in, all stuff that I guess rubbed people the wrong way. But again, I think part of the fresh start is going to be like, look, man, you're kind of going back to square one a little bit. You've got no kind of stock to, really the pedigree that he had when he went to Denver is not there now when he's here with Pittsburgh,
Right.
And I don't want to say that he's necessarily starting over, but this is a little bit of a fresh start. And I hope he kind of takes this opportunity to realize like, and again, you're not really seeing this because he's been super active on social media since he's gotten here, but you'd almost like to think that he would just kind of put his head down a little bit more and kind of go back to, football first before anything else, team first before anything else. And I don't know if we're necessarily going to get that. And I don't know if it really matters, but that's just some of the concerns. But again, I don't know how big of a deal that really is because even with all that being said, he still has had success in his career. The guy's won a Super Bowl before. So, it's not like that's completely been detrimental to his success before.
Yeah, exactly. And he knows what it takes because he's been there before. So adding someone like that, someone with his experiences, sort of pedigree, even if it was, maybe not the same degree as it was a few years ago, but it's still a huge, huge boost. And seeing, the likes of Cam Hayward, wanting him on the team and that's one of your leaders, Cam Hayward, like
Yeah.
that advocating and really like wanting him there in Pittsburgh. Like that says something, that he still has something, that Russell Wilson still has something left to prove.
No doubt. And the other big move that came to the quarterback room in the form of an addition for the Steelers was Justin Fields. I
Yeah.
mean, man, I texted you about this. I did not see this coming at all. This completely took me by surprise. But Pittsburgh trading a sixth-round pick that can become a fourth-round pick depending on playing time to come and be the backup in Pittsburgh, man. I mean, this was as unexpected as any move you could have told me, especially after Russell Wilson was brought in. I was so sure that Ryan Tannehill was going to be signed to be the backup, and that was going to kind of be the main cogs of the quarterback room. But going out and getting Justin Fields, I don't really know what it means for the future of the franchise and the future of the quarterback position in Pittsburgh. But at the very least, a guy that's got loads of talent, is arguably the best running quarterback in the NFL, and someone that Justin Fields has also said that he, kind of coming out of college, I think he said a lot, he models his game after Russell Wilson. So now all of a sudden he's going to kind of have some time sitting behind him and really kind of marinating in an NFL system a little bit longer, as it's going to be Russell Wilson off the bat getting, most of the reps.
Dude, just such a robbery. First off, like that just being straight up, like, I don't know. I mean, clearly the Bears misread Fields' trade value and all that, but like a sixth rounder that might not even, I mean, could turn to a fourth, yes, but that might not even happen. But that is nothing. Again, like this is like Howie Roseman-esque, almost, just like, these kinds of moves where it's like not totally, like, just like you feel like you won the trade almost. Like it's just
Yeah.
like you're on the winning side of it, and to have basically two starters in your quarterback room now. I mean, Fields is no slack. Like also probably better than Pickett and any of the other guys you've had in recent years. So like if Russell Wilson doesn't work out, you have Justin Fields there just waiting in the wing, and then just to fill like that. I mean, that's a crazy good quarterback. Like that's a great backup option to have. That's unreal, dude.
And a player by all measures that still has a ton of potential
Yeah,
and is super talented. And you wonder, with a little bit of time to sit, with a little bit of time to kind of learn this new Arthur Smith system that's not as quarterback dependent, what could he potentially grow into? Now that's where things get a little interesting, is I don't really know what Pittsburgh views as the future of Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. But again, this is a no risk move, because all you gave up was at worst a fourth round pick for him
yeah,
to come in, and you have a very, very, a guy that was a starter and won. Well, he was injured for part of last year, but has won games before, and really didn't look bad at the end of last season.
yeah,
That is now going to come in and be an option there. The interesting thing is they're going to have to make a decision on his fifth-year option in May.
yeah,
Which, I have to imagine they're not going to pick it up.
yeah,
But I mean, again, you never know if Pittsburgh has the caps, or has the cap room to do it and has kind of the financial flexibility to do it. I don't want to say anything's out of the realm of possibility now with Omar Khan and what he's done this offseason, but
yeah.
I guess that's kind of a wait and see thing of what they decide to do in sort of down the road with Fields. And I think it also is dependent on what Russell Wilson does with the team this year. But a very interesting player that they have now under control for a year and possibly another year, in the quarterback room.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers pretty much, at least short term, have solved their quarterback situation. And we've kind of talked about several times now. It feels like the Steelers are in a bit of a quarterback purgatory, where it's just like one guy. You really haven't found that face the next face of the franchise or that next superstar quarterback of your franchise. And sure, Russell Wilson's probably not going to be it, but you never know with Fields. That's certainly a possibility, like you said. But man, I would imagine you're feeling pretty optimistic with these two guys now.
I am 100%. And Ricardo, this was the biggest thing I was harping on kind of leading into this offseason is that the Steelers could not remain stagnant with the talented players that they have on this roster, with TJ Watt in his prime, Minkah Fitzpatrick in his prime, Alex Highsmith in his prime, Cam Hayward on the tail end of his career. You know, like they have so much talent on this roster that they are, in my opinion, you know, capable of competing for a division title. You couldn't just be stagnant and have it be Kenny Pickett and some other, you know, a Ryan Tannehill or a, you know, Jacoby Brissett competing for the job. This is an aggressive move of Omar Khan and this entire Steelers organization recognizing this window is going to close with TJ Watt and all these other talented players. And if we don't get serious about the quarterback position and really look ourselves in the eye and ask ourselves, what do we have in Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph? And you know, are we gonna kind of let ourselves stay in this quarterback purgatory? Are we gonna get aggressive to kind of make a move to salvage these, you know, couple years that all these defensive players are in their prime and try to make something, you know, legitimate out of it? And you know, is this a long-term answer at quarterback? That's yet to be seen, but it shows me that they recognize we need to, you know, do something serious about the most important position in sports.
Yeah, and like you said, with all these talented players you have, like you don't want their careers to, and what TJ Watt hasn't won a playoff game. Like so a lot of these guys haven't. So it's like it almost feels like now or never. And you said it, like the window is eventually going to close. And yeah, now is the time to act, and that's exactly what Khan has done. And man, I love, you know, it's just to me when a GM recognizes that to me is like, I don't know, they're just very in tune, like very in touch with their teams, like very just aware, like reading the room almost in that sense. It's just like, yeah, like I understand Omar Khan definitely like is that kind of person being aggressive. Like the window is now, the time to win is now.
Yeah.
And again, I keep saying that, like, it kind of reminds me of Howie Roseman because he's kind of done this too. But man, it's just the total difference from GMs like the Steelers have had. Colbert, the last one. I mean, there's just drastic change. I mean, and it's probably for the best. But I mean, man, you figured out the quarterback situation at least for this season. Like that's credit to him and whoever else really was, you know.
Well, I want to give a little bit of credit on that to, you know, to Rooney as well, because, you know, a lot of this has to come from the top down of also being willing to, you know, allow for this kind of change of the Steeler way. The Steelers used to be one of the least spending teams in the NFL when it came to free agency, and kind of to see this drastic change of being willing to take swings on guys like Isaac Seumalo last year and Patrick Queen this year, which we'll get into, and allow for a total overhaul of, you know, the quarterback room, and realize when you made a mistake in drafting Kenny Pickett, which was the former GM Kevin Colbert, but being willing to move up from that, even though Kenny Pickett still had up to 3 years of control. And there is, to a degree, some question marks still about what he has. And so he gets a little bit of credit, and obviously Khan gets some credit here, and you know, really just credit to the organization on what has been a really good free agency this year. As I just mentioned there, Kenny Pickett, just alluded to him, and now, also pretty surprisingly, he is now out of Pittsburgh and traded to who else but the Philadelphia Eagles. And let me actually ask you this off the rip, Ricardo, before we get into what you make of Kenny Pickett being the backup and what you make of the deal. But do you wish that the Eagles had just tried to trade for Justin Fields instead to be the backup rather than Kenny Pickett?
I mean, yeah, especially considering what the Steelers gave up, which was essentially a ham and cheese sandwich. Yeah, I would have done that easily. Oh my God, yeah, like in a heartbeat, I would have done that. Ah, man, that's again robbery, dude. Yeah,
And, you know, and it's like the one thing that I've read that kind of is the argument for Kenny Pickett over Justin Fields is the fact that Kenny Pickett's got that extra year of team control.
Mm.
Because obviously he's only going into his third season now, and that's why people are saying you kind of had to give up the extra or the straight up fourth round pick, I believe it was. Yeah, you had to give up just a straight up fourth round pick rather than one that could become a fourth round pick. But I mean, again, it's like what are the talent levels? What are the upside? So it does feel like Omar Khan was kind of playing chess while Ryan Poles was playing checkers, or while some of these other GMs were playing. I don't want to say that Howie Roseman was playing checkers, but I mean, like, it feels like that to a degree.
Yeah, no, it does. Like, to me, I just don't understand the trade to begin with. And I know we've talked about Kenny Pickett for feels like ages now, but we know what he is. Like, he's not. I mean, at this point, it almost seems like he's a backup, and um, like he he's really not that great. Like, it's easier to say now that he's not on the Steelers, and it's weird that I can say that he's on the Eagles, but it's just, to me, it's like you could have addressed this maybe signing Easton Stick, who recently re-signed with the Chargers, who was their backup last year to Justin Herbert. And I think also he filled in for Herbert when he went down with that. What was it? A hand injury, a broken finger, something like that.
Yeah, he played like the last 4 games of the season or something like that.
Yeah, at that point the Chargers were out of the playoff picture, but you could have. I mean, Kellen Moore was there with them. Like, you could have gone out and signed him, or I don't know, you bring in Ryan Tannehill, like you just said. There's a name. There were other options. I feel like you didn't have to give up these draft picks for someone who I don't know. Yes, I know he started.
I think the word for Pickett is he's still unproven. When
Yeah,
there were proven commodities that you could have gone after instead without having to give up any draft capital.
Exactly.
Like, you know what you're getting in Ryan Tannehill if you bring him in to be the backup.
Yeah, exactly. And he has way more experience. That's the other thing. And, like, not to say Jalen Hurts doesn't, but like someone who's kind of been there, done that sort of thing would have been more helpful as opposed to Kenny Pickett. But also you have Tanner McKee, who's I think he was undrafted or late draft pick last season. I mean, he could have had a shot at the backup position. I don't know, but that to me, it was like, again, that was Omar Khan kind of not outsmarting, but like he was kind of playing chess, as you said, as Howie Roseman playing checkers. To me, like, there was no need for this trade, but you know what? It's fine.
I mean, I think it's interesting how strongly that you don't like this trade. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still getting a guy that, like, at least from my perspective, like, I was looking at this, and maybe it was just me talking myself into, well, maybe we still haven't seen what Kenny Pickett can really do in the NFL, because, I mean, he's only played, I don't even think he's played a full season's worth of games yet in his career. So there's still a lot of kind of question marks about what he is talent-wise. Now, I get that that's not what you necessarily want in a backup quarterback, but I mean, it's a guy that he has tools that could make him a desirable backup, as far as, and again, this was called into question at points, but, one thing that was always his calling card was, his accuracy and kind of his decision-making. And again, this wasn't always on full display, but it's like, if that's what you're getting out of a backup, that's not the worst thing to have there.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I will say, like, he is better than Mariota. Like, that's also not a very high bar, I guess. But like, I'm trying to look at it in a more positive light, even though I just kind of ranted a little bit there. I think it'll be fine when it's all said and done. But
yeah,
again, I still think Howie Roseman could have gone about this a little differently, but it is what it is ultimately. But it was definitely not what I saw happening at all.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see it coming either. And I guess the last thing I'll kind of say on it too is it really goes to show you. I always felt that Kenny Pickett had the leadership aspect under his belt, and it was a matter of, can he just, perform on the field? And if he can, he's going to totally get the support of the huddle. With him requesting this trade and saying, I was caught sides by the Steelers organization, requesting the trade, this calls back into question towards the end of last season too. I think it was the Seattle game when there was the reports that Kenny Pickett was healthy, but Pittsburgh was going to stay with Mason Rudolph, and Kenny Pickett was refusing to dress. some of that starts to really kind of draw his character into question. And it kind of puts it a little more in perspective of, maybe the Steelers, after some of the drama they went through last year, maybe Kenny Pickett's not completely out of fault for kind of what went on and not being able to command the locker room. So
Yeah.
just something that kind of came to mind with me. And I think it's kind of one of those Mike Tomlinisms of, they want, volunteers, not hostages. And, ultimately 2 seasons in the Kenny Pickett era came to an end in Pittsburgh. And now he's going to try and, have to work his way back into an opportunity whenever it comes.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this is a good learning lesson for him. Cause I mean, if those reports are true, or, at least there's some truth to it, like, this has to at least humble him a little bit, because he knows he's not going to start now with Jalen
Yeah.
Hurts. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully
No
we
doubt.
don't see him next year, but but that's for another day.
Hopefully we don't see him next year, but someone we'll see plenty of in an Eagles uniform is going to be Saquon Barkley signing with the Philadelphia Eagles, man. Let's get into this a little bit. 3 years, just under $38 million, $26 million guaranteed. The former Giant, Ricardo, how do you feel about this move? What do you make of the signing?
It still feels weird because, he was just with the Giants. So he was running against us for 6 seasons. Like, it's still, I feel like I'm still processing it. And there's a couple of things I feel about it. First, there was someone at work who's also an Eagles fan, like coworker. Like, we're both Eagles. We talk Eagles like all the time. Before this even happened, he was like, "Just wait, Saquon to the Eagles is gonna happen." And what do you know? It literally happened. I haven't seen him yet in the office since, but I know the moment I see him, he's gonna be like, "I told you so." I mean, but from a roster standpoint, this was certainly a need. I mean, DeAndre Swift walked; he went to the Bears. I think Boston Scott was a free agent as well, and Kenny Gainwell really was the only running back in the room pretty much. So that had to be addressed. And I think it made sense. I mean, there were plenty of running backs out there. There was Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, some other guys out there. And I thought maybe it would have been someone like Eckler or Derrick Henry, maybe, but
Yeah.
um this if we're talking about like a skill level, I think I mean I know Saquon's dealt with injuries for his career, really, like every I feel like he's banged up every season, but what player isn't?
Yeah.
Um it's still,
Especially at the running back position.
and I think the Eagles got the most talented running back still. I mean, that was on the market essentially. And sure, you can say what you want about the contract. Sure, it might be overpaying him slightly, but this is your lead back now. This is someone. I mean, the Eagles haven't had a feature like lead back, like a bell cow running back since LaShawn McCoy. It feels like, because I mean, there's just feels like a laundry list of names. I mean, Jay Ajayi at one point, like Garrett Blunt, like some
Yeah.
of these guys who really only worked for a season. Ryan Matthews at some point was our running back. Like there
Yeah.
just hasn't been that number one guy. DeAndre Swift, you could argue maybe was, but Saquon, you're gonna give the ball to at least 20, 25 times per game, 20 like those touches per game. So
Yeah.
it certainly fills a need. Um, and I'm not mad about it. And it's certainly something Howie Roseman, I feel like, has never really invested in that running back position in his entire tenure. But like to see, I mean, it was very obvious they needed someone there.
Yeah.
For him to go against the grain, against what feels like his philosophy of not investing in that position, to me, it says, yeah, we need to retool. We need to win, because again, it almost like Omar Khan's like, we need to win now. Like our window is now.
Yeah.
But I feel a bit mixed about it still, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll say from my perspective, and obviously, like, being a Steelers fan, the Giant Eagle rivalry doesn't really, dawn on me. From a pure football standpoint, man, I think it's a home run from the standpoint of such a dynamic running back being paired in the backfield with Jalen Hurts. I mean, I think that's just going to wreak havoc. And the other thing, too, immediately upon this first season, even without Jason Kelsey there and some turnover on the offensive line, he's going to be running behind the most talented offensive line he's ever been playing with in his entire career, because he's been playing with dog crap offensive lines in New York. So, I mean, what he's done in the past now combined with a dynamic quarterback that he's playing with, a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, and really just talented skill positions all over the offensive side of the football. I think it's a home run, and I think it's going to work out brilliantly as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope. That's really like the big if can't like the big question. Like, can he stay healthy the full season? I mean, this is a guy who's rushed for 1,000 yards, what, 3 times? He's made 2 Pro Bowls, but in the seasons he hasn't, he's dealt with injuries. So you kind of hope that he can kind of get to that 1,000 yard mark. I feel like that should be good enough to propel this off and make this offense a little more dynamic than it was last year. And maybe this is also a way of showing that the Eagles are going to commit to the running game more, because last year it seemed like, it kind of fell off. Like DeAndre Swift at points didn't even get 10 carries a game. It felt like only a handful of touches. I mean, in the playoff game, I think he only got 5 carries. So maybe that's a sign that they will commit to the run game a bit more. But I think it will work out. It's just, to me right now, it feels a little iffy, but I'm a little more optimistic than I was when it first happened.
Yeah. Well, I certainly like it. I don't really have much more to add on it unless you do, and then we can kind of get into some of these other free agent signings.
No, that's all I have too. Let's get into the other ones, man.
All right. Well, there are certainly still plenty of decently big ones. Let's stick with the Eagles for now. Big one at the outside linebacker position, Bryce Huff, former Jet, 3 years, $51 million, $34 million guaranteed, to come in and be another pass rusher here in Philadelphia. What do you make of this signing, man? I don't know if this one caught you by surprise. I think I kind of posed the name in our last episode, and like you knew he was going to get paid. It didn't seem like it maybe was a fit, and here he is in Philadelphia now.
Yeah, this one I'm also still like kind of processing. It's like from a pass rushing standpoint, he's great. He's really good, and obviously coming off 10 sacks is a career high, and he's been more of a rotational, at least with the Jets, was more of a rotational guy. And that's in part because he's not that good against the run. So first, second down, you probably won't see him on the field. Now, when it comes to third downs and obvious passing situations, he's definitely going to be on the field because, I mean, that's what he does best, rushing the passer, getting after the quarterback. So, I mean, the Eagles are betting on upside here, which they've done before in the past. And to me, this is like, I don't know if you can keep Reddick now, but again, I'm kind of optimistic too because of his potential. And let's for now keep Hassan Reddick out of the picture. You line him up, across Josh Sweat, who's also only turning 27, and sure he might have had a down year, but that's because of the defensive scheme and the coaching changes and all that. But those are two still really solid, really, I mean, edge rushers, really. We're going to get after the quarterback. Josh Sweat always, I mean, he produces so much pressure. And then Bryce Huff, I would imagine it would do the same. And maybe could alleviate some of that pressure on the interior from Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I think this will also work out. I think it also isn't surprising to me because Howie Roseman loves to invest in the trenches, offensive, defensive line. It's just his mojo, man. That's what he does best. So I think overall, I think it's a solid move. And I don't know if you want me to answer this or talk about Hassan Reddick at all, but
well, yeah, let's get into it, because then I was going to start. I mean, like you said, Howie Roseman loves to invest in the trenches, but now, and again, Vic Fangio, runs the 3-4, so there's a little bit more onus on outside linebackers in that system. So it makes sense to kind of stock up there. But now when you look at kind of outside linebackers, you have Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, the first round pick last year. Yeah. I mean, Patrick Johnson, who was still getting rotational snaps last year. I mean, you have a lot of guys that can play outside linebacker. And you just kind of wonder, is there going to be an odd man out in some way? And what does that kind of mean for Hassan Reddick? So, I mean, I guess I will ask you that, what does that mean for Hassan Reddick? As we were talking about, could he possibly get extended? And I don't know, does this make a trade seem more likely at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it probably does, especially because, I mean, the funny thing about, I'll say Josh Sweat, he thought he was going to be like traded or something because he tweeted like, oh, like it was, I forget what the exact tweet was, basically saying like he was grateful for his time in Philadelphia. And then they restructured his deal, so he's going to stay now. And so that added even more to the idea that maybe Hassan Reddick will get traded. But, and he's also, Hassan Reddick is a bit, he's 30, and that's not that old, but again, you could probably say Huff and Reddick are a bit similar in the sense of they're better getting after the quarterback as opposed to run game. But yeah, I at this point I wouldn't be surprised if Reddick's gone. I mean, if you kept all these guys, that is a, I mean, that would be crazy to have these pass rushers you could just rotate in every couple down like that. That would be, that almost reminds me of the Super Bowl at the run that they had, and I mean even the Super Bowl they lost to the Chiefs. But yeah, I think it might be a time for Reddick to go at this point.
And maybe one of those things too, where you'd rather be a year early than a year late on a guy. I mean, if they can kind of maximize the return for him now before he starts to kind of go on the decline, maybe that's something that they try to do. But it'll be interesting to see if they, do extend him and try to make an Eagle for, the future and just have, one of the most stacked pass rushing groups in the entire NFL. So, I mean, I guess we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, right now, I mean, Bryce Huff definitely is going to be getting his opportunities to get to the quarterback, any way you slice it or dice it. You don't bring him in here and pay him that money to not give him snaps trying to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
So some other big new moves for the Eagles. How about this one, Ricardo? And I think we kind of were starting to hear the rumors about this in our last episode, or maybe we were just texting about it, but CJ Gardner-Johnson coming back to the Eagles, 3 years, $33 million. I personally love this deal. I know there was a little bit of bad blood when CJ Gardner-Johnson left, last time, but now he's here for the next 3 years. Philadelphia is going to be his home for a couple seasons. What do you make of him coming back when the Eagles let him go to Detroit last offseason?
So that's a loaded question because I think when we were talking about it last episode, I was like, this is kind of like getting back together with your ex sort of thing.
Yes, that was the analogy used.
It was like you shouldn't do it. And the more I think about it now, I'm like, I don't care. Scrap that. Like, no, this to me was, I think, my favorite move of them all. Even if there was bad blood, even though he kind of trashed the Eagles fans last offseason. I mean, it was just so obvious that they were missing him last year, and just playmaking ability, the moxie that this guy plays with, his confidence, trash talking ability too, like that. It's just, as a player himself on the field, just, I mean, it just feels like that's what the Eagles were missing. So bringing him back and giving him the money that he deserved, even though he was injured this past season for the most part with the line, with that torn pec or whatever it was. He's still going to be an impactful player, and he's going to be playing alongside Reed Blankenship. Them two together, it was, I mean, it was a pretty solid tandem in that backfield, the secondary. But I do really like this move. I just love everything about it. Money wise, I think it makes sense, and it's a need. Again, it was a need that the Eagles had to address. So bringing in someone who already played for you, who was already in the building, like, yeah, I'm all for it. Forget what I said about the getting back with your ex thing. I love it.
Well, man, I mean, I'll even say too, I mean, he apologized to Eagles fans on Twitter. I mean, he was asked about it in his, reintroductory press conference. And he said, it was kind of an immature thing for him to do, and he's kind of learned from it. He even said, too, being injured last year kind of taught him a lot about, the importance of the team aspect and the way a football organization functions, not only with the players, but with kind of a lot more that goes into it. And, maybe he comes back here with some more perspective and definitely was a player that the Eagles were missing on the field last year. I mean, we've talked about how, it might have been a mistake letting him walk compared to James Bradbury last free agency. Now they have both of them in the secondary again. And I mean, he's still only like 26 years old, man. I mean, you could say that he's only just entering his prime now. And, and safety was a position of need for the Eagles. And now that they've, kind of addressed that, and, that room should be a lot better with him back in there.
I sure hope so. And I mean, yeah, it's just, I just love everything about it. And like I said, forget what I said in that last episode, because that to me was like just speculation at that point. But now that it's happened, I'm actually very glad it's happened, because yeah, like I said, he's been in Philadelphia. He knows what it takes to be successful there, and he was with the team that went on to get to the Super Bowl. So it's great for experience, and I just love it, man.
And I mean, dude, we always talked about this when he was in Philadelphia 2 seasons ago. Like, his attitude fits Philadelphia. And yeah, he may have called the Philadelphia fans obnoxious, but honestly, he's a bit of an obnoxious player himself.
Yeah.
So, I say let it rock, man. Let bygones be bygones, and build a bridge over this trouble. And you know what? If he can help lead the Eagles to a deep playoff run and potentially a Super Bowl ring, all will be forgiven if it hasn't already.
Yeah, exactly. I've forgiven him. I mean, I wasn't actually ever mad at him, I don't think, but
there you go. Well, that's one position of need that was addressed on the Eagles defense. And another one that was also of need and was addressed with 3 players, but we'll talk about the main one. Devin White coming in on a 1-year deal to play inside linebacker, man. What'd you make of this move? And if you want to touch on kind of Zach Bond and Oren Burks, I believe I'm saying his name right, also being brought in, along with obviously Nakobe Dean and Ben Van Sumeren were the 2 that were already kind of the incumbents at the inside linebacker room. But Devin White, along with 2 other free agents brought in for inside linebacker. What do you make of the way Howie Roseman has gone about addressing this position?
So this one, I mean, I wanted Devin White out of all the other linebackers, because I thought it was more realistic in terms of like price. And I mean, some of these other guys, I mean, obviously the Steelers paid one of them. So I just thought that the Eagles weren't going to be able to pay certain or other linebackers, other high end, sort of top of the market linebackers. So I thought this one just made sense. And Devin White's still what I think also 27. So
yes,
he's not. Yeah. So still you could say is entering his prime. And he's played in 76 or 75 to 76 games. It's either that or 76 out of 76. So he's durable. That's the other thing. It just feels like linebackers for the Eagles, at least last year, definitely, they were just injured for the most part. Nakobe Dean is, I mean, obviously the most obvious one of them all. But again, he adds experience. He's also probably the most athletic linebacker the Eagles have had since, I want to say, Michael Kendricks, which was during the Super Bowl run. And then I think after that, they parted ways with him. But again, it's speed. That's, I feel like, what the Eagles have needed. So that also fills that need of, because it just felt like the defense was too slow, as we've talked about several times throughout the season and in the offseason. So it checks a lot of boxes. And even if it's a 1-year deal, so be it. It's kind of a prove it for him. That should hopefully motivate him to, want to get that big contract at the end of it all. But to me, I really like this signing. The other 2, I mean, Zach Bond and Oren Burks, I feel like those are more just bodies in there to have, because, like I said, the linebacker room kind of depleted last year with all the injuries, but they also, I think, will probably be more special teamers than anything, especially with the likes of Sean Bradley, who was out the entire season last year. Probably not coming back. He's a free agent. So they have some needs there, special teams too. So I'm sure they might get some snaps here and there. Zach Bond, especially, I think he had a career high in defensive snaps played this past year. But to me, Devin White, that was a great. I really like that move. It just more depth too. That certainly helps.
And I mean, Devin White, definitely a prove-it year for him. And I believe he lost his job at some point last season, which kind of affected how much money he was going to make. So he's going to have an opportunity here with Philadelphia, and yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a prove it 1-year deal so that he can try and get paid, man. So we'll see how he does in Philadelphia. As far as other free agent signings go with the Eagles, I mean, you want to talk about these two extensions real quick. Brandon Graham coming back on a 1-year deal, and Landon Dickerson getting the big 4-year, $84 million extension. Do you want to touch on those a little bit?
Yeah, well, Brandon Graham, I'll just say that's not surprising. He got the 1 year. Like
Yeah,
he's gonna retire with Philly. Like there was never a doubt in my mind that he was gonna do so. So, it made sense. I mean, that's just poetic way to end it. Really, end his career
yeah,
where he started it. Landon Dickerson. Now that one, like I had a feeling he was gonna get an extension. I didn't think he was going to be maybe like this much to the point where he's now the highest. I think he's the highest paid guard now, right? In the NFL, something like that. And I mean, I do love him. He's really good. I think he's better in the run game than he is as pass blocker. But it's Jeff Stoutland who's the offensive line coach. He's still young. Like he was on a rookie deal still from. I mean, the past few seasons. So to me, he's only going to get better, which is, I think, also what the Eagles are betting on. That's sort of how they did it with Mailata, kind of betting on upside, and seemed to pan out. And you pretty much have locked up the left side of your offensive line for the next few seasons.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Dickerson's like he's just a mauler. I just love the way he plays, the way he blocks and finishes off his blocks too. So I think it makes sense, and hopefully he lives up to that contract. I'm sure he will, but it was the numbers wise, probably a little more than I expected. But I'm not going to say he doesn't deserve it because I think he does. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, that to me was great.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to be expected to kind of take over that leadership role on the offensive line that is going to be left a little bit without Jason Kelsey there. And he's talked about taking in a bigger role pre-snap, and I think he's definitely going to be a focal point of that O-line and helping Cam Jurgens come along as the new center for the team. So they lock him up. He's going to be a staple of this team for a long time, it looks like. As far as other moves with the Eagles, I mean, the two other free agent signings were Matt Hennessy and Devontae Parker. And I don't know if you have anything else you kind of want to comment on with those kind of more minor moves.
Matt Hennessy to me just feels more like a depth piece because, I mean, yeah, he started with the Falcons and he's been a starter in his career, but to me, he seems more like a backup. And I mean, I'm not going to say he won't start. I think he'll compete for the starting right guard position. I mean, I don't know if he'll play center. He could. He has done it before, but it'll be interesting to see how training camp goes. Like this battle specifically goes with Tyler Steen and Suapeta is not returning with the Eagles. Jack Driscoll, I think he's still free, or he might have signed somewhere. I'm not sure. But
Jack, I think Driscoll signed today.
oh, did he? Okay, well
Yeah.
that I didn't see. So
Not with Philadelphia. I don't remember where it was. I think it might have been Tennessee, but he got picked up somewhere.
okay, yeah. So now to me, yeah, that's more just like for depth purposes. But I mean, again, he's been in the league since 2020, so it's another body there to have. Who was the other one? Oh, Devontae Parker. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he's not even on the roster because you're only paying him 1.2 million, and Patriots
Yeah.
are paying like the other 3.5 or something like that. Because I mean, he's you could say he's a burner, but like according to next gen stats, he's like dead last in creating separation. So each of the last 4 years too, which is a fun fact. That's actually kind of impressive. The last 4 years, he's
That's
been dead
crazy.
last. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's not even on the roster. But it's another body to potentially compete for wide receiver 3. But that's really all I have on those two.
All right, man. So then I'll just ask you, I mean, is there anything else you see the Eagles kind of doing in free agency before the draft? Is there anything else you see them? I mean, obviously we're kind of at the point of really prove it deals. There's nothing more major that's going to happen, but anything else you want them, or you'd ideally in a perfect world like them to address before the draft?
I mean, maybe another safety, just like for depth, and I guess you could say that for defensive line too, because at least interior defensive tackle especially, like you could probably add another body in there. Offensive line too, that wouldn't hurt. Just 1 year deals for for depth purposes, just to have someone there in case someone goes down. That's really all I see happening.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So I think that makes it just about time. Let's move over to the Steelers now, man, and get into some of these offseason moves that they have made. And we'll start with Patrick Queen, man. This was kind of the big deal. After the first day of the tampering period, all we had was Russell Wilson, which was done before that tampering period, and
Yep.
Cameron Johnston, the new punter in Pittsburgh.
Yes, Hammer Eagle.
So it was kind of an anxious, when's Omar gonna, make that big splash? And it came in the form of Patrick Queen, signing him to a 3-year, $41 million deal, only $13.6 million guaranteed. But to me, man, this is just Pittsburgh getting that inside linebacker that they've kind of been looking for and desperately wanting. Really, since Ryan Shazier's career came to an end, it feels like they've been looking for that next real, Pittsburgh Steeler inside linebacker. And, I think with the uncertainty behind Cole Holcomb coming off that major knee injury, and after the inside linebacker room just got decimated, you knew that this was going to be a position that they'd address. And I love the move bringing in Patrick Queen. Kind of like when you said that Devin White was kind of the perfect player for Philadelphia, Patrick Queen felt like the perfect guy for the Steelers, and he comes over from rival Baltimore. So makes one of your rivals a little bit weaker as well.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Both our teams kind of did a rival signing a rival player, but it was. You even said this in the last episode. I'm pretty sure this was a need that they were probably going to add some linebacker at some point, and that this is one of the biggest ones on the market there. Like I think this is a home run signing for the Steelers, and this is a guy with speed, lateral. I mean, side to side. I mean, you talk about just well rounded. This is the guy, like just athlete, good tackler. You could also use him in blitz packages. So I just think this is a really good signing. And honestly, Cole Holcomb could probably come off as from the third linebacker, which is also a solid person to have. Coming off not the bench, but in for some rotational snaps, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the move, and I also love how, he's kind of said that he's looking forward to playing the villain role against Baltimore, and he's talked about, going up against Derrick Henry now and how he's looking forward to that. And excuse me. I even love the story that I don't remember if he gave it or who gave it, but he talked about when the times that he would be playing in his I think it was his rookie season for Baltimore, and Mike Tomlin would kind of chirp over at him and say, "You're not a Raven. You're not a Raven. Yeah. You don't belong there." Knowing that down the road he was eventually going to try and grab him. And look at Patrick Queen now, here in Pittsburgh, filling that inside linebacker role. So I absolutely love the move, and it was a need that the Steelers, and now have addressed fully. And again, it's another just really, really, you could almost say another star type player on the defense, man. That now joins some of these other stars that are there, making this team it's another piece that gets them that much closer to being, a really polished roster.
Yeah, just moving that needle just a little bit more to, being a contender potentially. But yeah, great signing on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no doubt. So the next, I guess we'll kind of keep it with former Ravens for now, and I'll bring up Deshaun Elliott, who was signed. He was with Miami last year. I think he was with the Lions the year before that, but he was with Baltimore for a few seasons. And this is another signing, man. I'll be honest, I didn't really know too much about him before the signing, but man, watching his introductory press conference, this is a guy that I can tell I'm just going to love. He kind of carries his attitude the right way. And just the fact that in his press conference, they asked him, "Why'd you want to come play with the Steelers?" He pointed at the logo and said, "It's Pittsburgh. It's hard-nosed football. It's cold weather games." This guy fits the Steelers mindset so perfectly. I know that I'm just going to gravitate towards him. And he's even talked about how he's totally willing to be flexible to make it work with these other guys in the secondary. He seems like the type of guy that knows he's not the star of a defense, but when you've got talented players like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Patrick Queen and, a budding star cornerback in Joey Porter Jr., he knows that his best ability is going to be availability and just being willing to do whatever the defense needs him to do and really just, play Steeler football. And I absolutely love that about this guy.
Yeah, man. Sometimes those are just the best players. It's just like they know their place, but they're still gonna give it everything they have. And
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it like from a schematic standpoint. I think I read something saying that Elliott's more of a inside the box kind of guy, and was more on like run support. And he's had, I think he had 86 tackles last year, and to me also that frees up Minka Fitzpatrick a bit to kind of roam a bit more. So again, that to me is more depth, and certainly at least because Minka Fitzpatrick feels like he's done everything, like just about in every single. You see him like every part of the field. So maybe this alleviates that a little bit for him, and it
Yeah.
won't put as much pressure on Minka. So I think this is also just from that standpoint a really good signing too.
Yes, the my excitement level of this signing versus like bringing Keanu Neal last year was another inside the box safety. I'm so much more excited about the possibility of this. I don't think I mentioned it. 2 years, 6 million, so it's also very team friendly.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when you look at the room, these two guys are going to be your starting safeties, and you have Demonte Casey who's still there, another guy that can roam a little bit and is a little bit more of a free safety. And you bring back Miles Killebrew, which I said was going to be a big deal for this team, a
Yep.
special teams ace. All of a sudden this safety room looks really solid, and I'm excited. I feel very confident in what they have at this position group right now. After this point of the free agency period, so very happy with that signing. Now, another big move that was not a free agent move, but a trade, man, and a big trade. And this was something we talked about a little bit. We heard rumblings that this could potentially happen, but the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson and a 6th-round pick to Carolina in exchange for Deontay Johnson, a 7th-round pick in exchange for Dante Jackson and a 6th-round pick. So the Steelers get another corner to add to their room. I mean, all they had was really Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, and Darius Rush from
Yep.
guys who were on the roster last year. And Corey Trice tore his ACL in training camp. So this was a room that obviously needed to be addressed. Dante Jackson's a guy that started 16 games last season. He's had some solid years. I mean, I think he's a little bit better than what you necessarily see on like sites like PFF. Or isn't necessarily the biggest fan of him, but he's a
Yeah.
guy that's been reliable, and he's been, when you look down at what Carolina's had in the corner room, former 1st-round pick J.C. Horn seems to be hurt with something every year, and Dante Jackson outside of 2022 has been incredibly reliable for Carolina in his. I believe he's been in the league for 6 years now. So Pittsburgh gets a guy that is going to be able to play on the outside and play opposite Joey Porter Jr. And is he necessarily going to be the greatest cornerback in the NFL? No, but it's a position that was of need. And, at the very least, they have somebody now on the roster aside from Joey Porter Jr. that they can feel comfortable starting.
Yeah. Again, feeling a need, even if it came at the expense of Deontay Johnson. But yeah, again, you say it's another body, another corner to have there starting. I mean, at this point, starting opposite Joey Porter Jr. I mean, that could change from
Yeah.
here till the start of the season, but still, it's someone with experience, and but also younger than Patrick Peterson. So it's a good middle ground, I think, on that front too. It's not someone who's of that age of Patrick Peterson, but he's not like as young as Joey Porter. Like he has just enough experience, I feel like, to where I think Joey Porter Jr. can, learn a bit from him. So I think it works. I think it's a really good fit.
Yeah, definitely. Patrick Peterson is in his 30s. I mean, Dante Jackson is going to be going into his age 29 season. They were Omar Khan. I don't know how he exactly worked it, but he was able to make he was able to kind of work his contract. So he was originally owed $10 million against the cap, and now it's only going to be about half of that. So again, some Omar Khan wizardry, and it's another body that's there. And could there be another starter at cornerback, whether through the draft or through something or another? Who knows? But as of right now, you have someone that you would be comfortable rolling with as a starter going into, next season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just upgrades on the defensive side, man, have been, I mean, great, really.
Yeah. I mean, they're really, and I guess this is one thing I'll just say: there hasn't been a move that the Steelers have made that I haven't liked so far this offseason, which is pretty incredible. So just to kind of rip through some of the smaller ones. I mentioned Cameron Johnston, is going to be your punter next season. Nothing crazy, but obviously something of need. Van Jefferson was brought in, a guy that really, he was a former, I believe, second round pick. I think he was drafted the same year as Chase Claypool.
Yeah, I
But
think so.
and maybe I should mention the fact I didn't really touch on Deontay Johnson going to Carolina, but it's one of those things where it freed up some cap space. And I think that there was just kind of a tension there that the Steelers were ready to move on. And again, this is kind of what I talk about with Kenny Pickett of, Mike Tomlin, the Steelers organization, they want volunteers, not hostages. And, we've talked about this with Arthur Smith's system. It's not always the most friendly to wide receivers as far as stats go. And you really need a lot of guys at the wide receiver position that are going to be willing blockers. And to expect that out of Deontay Johnson, it just seemed like maybe, it had run its course. It didn't really seem like they were planning on extending him as he's in the last year of the deal. So to be able to get another starter on the defensive side of the football for him and, have a pick swap, it made sense. So, and now you bring in Van Jefferson, who I ultimately believe by the time the season really starts is going to be more of a depth piece. But again, you need depth at every position. So bringing him in on a cheap deal is not bad at all.
Yeah, I like that move too. I mean, it's probably a wide receiver 3 sort of thing. I mean, more of a rotational guy, but again, like you said, it's not Arthur Smith's offense isn't the most, they don't rely on receivers as much as they do, running backs or tight ends. So it made sense from a financial standpoint to move on, and just from a, I guess, tension standpoint, like you said, to move on from Dion. I mean, at least you're getting something in return as opposed to getting nothing, letting him walk next season. So it was, again, smart business ultimately.
Yeah. It made sense. And, I guess that can kind of lead me into the next, sort of phase of the Steelers free agency. I don't think they're done yet in free agency. And the one name I've talked about this, Tyler Boyd, I think he's going to be a Steeler when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
A guy grew up in Pittsburgh, went to college at Pitt, a guy that Mike Tomlin has said before, is a player that he wishes he had, drafted or was able to coach. It just feels like it makes too much sense for him to come in and be a wide receiver. So I think the Steelers are still going to, and again, if this was more Kevin Colbert, but they've always had success drafting wide receivers, especially in the middle rounds, that it wouldn't, I expect them to still draft a wide receiver in April. But I feel that Tyler Boyd is a guy that's going to ultimately end up in black and gold when it's all said and done. The other interesting name at wide receiver that's still out there, and I believe a meeting is scheduled now, is Mike Williams, who was let go by the Chargers, man. Big body, deep threat, contested catches. It'll be interesting to see if that's what ultimately, if he's ultimately the guy, man, that Pittsburgh brings in. But there's going to be a market for him, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Boyd, it probably should be the priority because, like you said, you pretty much just like he's practically free. He's from Pittsburgh. Like, at this point, I would be shocked if they didn't bring him in. But Mike Williams, that's not a bad option either. I mean, he might be more injury prone, but still, like, it's kind of a boom or bust sort of thing too. I mean, you already have Pickens, who's reliable on his own. So, I mean, I think either one works, but I think Boyd would probably fit better.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the only other positions, and I don't think this is going to come in free agency, but just the Steelers kind of neglected to address center or right tackle.
Yeah.
At this point, I imagine it's probably going to be in the draft. So we'll talk about that more in depth later. But overall, I'm very pleased with what the Steelers have been able to do so far in free agency. And I guess the last thing I'll kind of say with Steelers free agency, Mason Rudolph going to Tennessee. Man, like, I'm not going to lie. I love what the Steelers have done with the quarterback room, but seeing him go, I mean, he's been here for years now. At one point was considered the possible successor to Ben Roethlisberger, man. I'm a little bit sad to see him go just because he has been here for a number of years, but I think Tennessee is a perfect landing spot for him. They've really invested in the offensive line. They've got a number of weapons there. They just brought in Tony Pollard to be the new running back with Derrick Henry gone. they have Will Levis there, who's the starter, and Mason Rudolph is going to be the backup. But it wouldn't shock me if at some point during this season, or you never want to see an injury, but even possibly just from playing time, he gets a shot in Tennessee. So I'm happy to see him kind of go somewhere that he's one spot away from being a starter and having another shot, because he did a lot for this organization down the stretch this season. And he's always been a good player for Pittsburgh, and has always just kind of went about his business. And from getting smashed in the head by Myles Garrett, leading this team to a playoff run this season, there's definitely been a lot of memories with Mason Rudolph, which is not something I was really anticipating saying coming onto this podcast, but it really has been looking back on it.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect way to end it almost. But it's. I hope he does well too, man, because he's done a lot for you guys, so he deserves the best.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have for Pittsburgh and free agency, man. One thing that I think we should circle back on real quick that I don't think we mentioned was Fletcher Cox retiring. That happened right after our last episode, and so much has happened since then that it's almost so far in the back burner. But I mean, a great career entirely with Philadelphia, and he called it a career prior to free agency.
Yeah, I mean, that does feel like so long ago that happened, but tons. I mean, one of the best defensive tackles the Eagles have had, and to ever play for the franchise. I believe he has the most sacks as the defensive tackle, because all the top 4 are all edge rushers, I believe. So that's pretty good company up there, and he's accolade after 6-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro, 6-time captain. I mean, that's the biggest thing, the captain part of it, the leadership. That's certainly going to be missed on the defensive side of the ball. The 3rd most games played in franchise history, the 5th most sacks in franchise history, as I said. Was part of the 2010s All-Decade team. And spending his entire career with the Eagles, it's just, again, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you don't really see these kinds of, a player starts with one team and then end with it too. So that's to see now 2 players to have ended it, where they started, with first obviously being Kelsey. That to me is like this one also kind of stings, for sure. But at the end of the day, it's like he was a really good player, really, really good leader. One of the, guys looked up to him. And he's certainly going to be missed in the locker room. But it's just how the game goes. Sometimes when it's your time, it's your time. But yeah, man, it's just those 2 big losses. But I wish nothing for the best for Kelsey and for Cox. And I hope he's, sticks around in Philadelphia and is around, and I don't know, can in some capacity be, associated with us. But I love Big Fletch. Fletch is amazing.
I think that's a good way to end it, man. That's a good way to end it. And we will be back soon enough, because the NFL cycle, the NFL calendar year never really stops. And there's always going to be more news to talk about. So until then, thank you everybody for tuning in, and take care. Peace out. Bye-bye.